All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Transportation Committee meeting of Monday, September 21, 2020. I am Councilman Mike Bauman, the chair of the committee, joined by my colleagues, Mr. Buscaino and Mr. Koretz. And before we go any further, let me note for the record that due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the City Council and its committees is availing themselves of authority granted to them by Governor Newsom to do remote meetings, of which this is one. And if people would like to comment on any of the items on today's agenda, they may do so by calling 669-254-5252 and using meeting ID 161-750-5079, and then pressing pound and pound again when prompted for participant ID. I will say that again. Members of the public who would like to offer public comment on the items listed on the agenda should call 669-254-5252 and use meeting ID number 161-750-5079, and then press pound and press pound again when prompted for participant ID. All right, so a full quorum is here, and there's a number of items I was going to recommend for consent, but we do need to hear public comment before we do that. So do we have any public comment on the line at this point, Mr. Bruins?
We do. Hold on one second. We're having some technical difficulties.
Why don't I do this? Why don't I ask the general manager for her report first? Then before we act or receive and file that one, we will do public comment on that and any other items.
Sounds good.
All right. So that would bring us to item number one.
Item number one is the general manager from the Department of Transportation to present a verbal report relative to the department's ongoing projects and recognition of the department's employees for outstanding service.
All right. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to join you virtually and share some of our recognition for some of our great folks at DOT who have really been putting themselves out there on the front lines and also behind the scenes and working tirelessly to try and juggle all of the sort of changing needs of DOT while continuing to literally keep the lights on, the traffic lights on. So today I'm going to start with first recognizing traffic painter and signposter one, Alan Riddell. Mr. Riddell started with LADOT in April of 2005. His vast experience in the private sector and knowledge of specialized equipment has made him a valuable asset to the paint and sign division. In 2014, Mr. Riddell promoted to a traffic painter signposter 3, where he serves as the crew chief in the citywide markout operation. He was recently promoted to a traffic marking sign superintendent 1 in the citywide operation and ensures that striping is restored on all pavement preservation program projects within 10 days and oversees all markouts and striping in the city. Mr. Riddell has led several projects, including the Vista Del Mar lane reconfiguration, Los Angeles Street Bike Lane Project, Spring Dual Lane Bike Lane Project, and many more. There's no project too small or too large or mountain too high for Alan Riddell to climb. He brings the same level of passion, expertise, and professionalism to the job. His dedication and commitment to the operation is what makes him a valuable asset to LADOT. Thank you, Alan. Next, I want to recognize Deshane Miller. Deshane Miller is a first-level supervisor and oversees traffic signal construction for the Valley area. Deshane has demonstrated excellent work ethic, always goes above and beyond the call of his duties, recently assumed the role as acting senior supervisor, and he has done an outstanding job along with continuing to fulfill the duties of his first-level position. So threading the needle with the machine still running, Deshane has been a model employee and is recognized as a major asset to our department. Thank you, Deshane. Next up, Mr. Mark Granado. Mark is an outstanding and self-motivated employee that has worked for the city for 19 years in various departments, gaining experience in accounting, budget, finance, and retirement and utility services. He's truly a five-tool player and a utility player throughout the city. As a senior management analyst, too, at LADOT, he manages the Parking Operations Division, responsible for citation processing, coin collection, meter security, and other programs. His commitment and dedication to his staff generates exceptional results. This past year, he led the reduction of citation initial review request backlogs from 33,000 to 300. That is not a typo. This man came in and took a backlog of 33,000 initial review requests and took it down to 300. And he oversees the expansion of the Community Assistance Parking Program, which received national recognition at the 2020 National Parking Association Conference. Mark is not only results-oriented, he is a great team player, always willing to assist others in the department, and he has a great attitude. Thank you so much, Mark. And last but certainly not least, Corrine Ralph. I think you probably all have interacted with Corrine. She's an exceptional leader in the department. She heads the LADOT Transit. She's our transit chief, where she runs the second largest public transit fleet in the county after LA Metro, with over 700 contract drivers and 350 buses. She's a dedicated and tireless leader who's helped to make Dash, Commuter Express, Dial-A-Ride, and LA Now into successful public transit programs that are highly sought after by many communities. She runs a very tight ship. With a small but mighty group of planners and engineers, she has been instrumental in delivering critical lifeline mobility service options for many Angelinos while leading to elevate LADOT Transit to new heights. She's a thoughtful and forward-thinking leader who has invested in the right transit technologies and made notable forward progress on bus electrification efforts. Corrine is committed to delivering excellent customer service. Many of the transit services she oversees enjoy huge customer satisfaction support and brand recognition. Through her strong sense of public service and social justice, she's been a voice and an advocate for the most vulnerable users of public transit. Her notable contributions in this area include the doubling of Dial-A-Ride subsidies for seniors and disabled folks, and free transit rides for students. The department recognizes her open, flexible, thoughtful, and super responsive leadership style and appreciates her immense service contribution as an exemplary public servant. Thank you, Corrine. And thanks to all of the LADOT outstanding employees that we're recognizing today.
Nice. Fantastic. Congratulations to Alan and to Shane and Mark and Corrine. Just absolutely phenomenal. And kudos to you. Benefit is you didn't have to schlep all the way up to the 10th floor of City Hall for this. You get to be in the comfort of your own offices or homes for the accolades. Mr. Koretz or Buscaino, anything you'd like to add?
Well, being the newest member of the committee, I was so looking forward to this item, and thank you, Shalita, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for moving and advancing the recognition of our department employees and personnel. So just thank you so much. I believe all committees and all departments or chairs should take your lead, Mike, on recognizing our folks. Well done. Thank you for your service.
You should take my lead just on recognizing their folks or on everything?
No, I'm not going to commit to that.
Yeah, we should just do whatever you want. We should take your lead. I agree. And thanks for recognizing all these great folks. They've done some wonderful things, and they're unsung heroes in the department, although we've sung their praises today at least.
That's right. I also enjoy being able to see, I think Mark turned on his video. I really appreciate being able to see his COVID mustache game. I don't get to see everybody, and their appearances are all changing in really interesting ways. And so I'm delighted by getting a chance to see some of them here today. Thank you very much to all of you, and thank you very much to the committee council members for your support.
You bet. Thanks. So before we actually receive and file this item, we do need to do public comment. So I'm going to open up a public comment on all items now, including general public comment. So, Mr. Bruins, are we ready?
ITA requests a 60-second recess to reconnect one of the audio lines. So just give us 1 second.
Okay.
We're ready to take public comment.
Let's do so.
Okay. So I'm going to call callers, I will admit you one by one. Please identify yourself and which items you'd like to speak. You will receive 2 minutes for general public, or 1 minute for general public comment, and up to 2 minutes for all other items. The first caller will be with the last 4 digits, 7719. Your line is open. Go ahead. Caller with the last 4 digits, 7719. Your line is open. Please identify yourself and which items you'd like to speak on.
Thank you. My name is Eric Previn, and I'm from Studio City, and I'll speak on the agenda items as well as a general public comment.
Okay, you have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Is this Mr. Ben Como?
No, this is Eric Bruin.
Okay, fine.
Please start.
Let's move forward. I agree, Mr. Bonham. Thank you. And let me simply set the right tone by saying how appreciative I am also for Ms. Reynolds recognizing the hardworking men and women who are out there every single day. Caveat on Mark, who examined initial reviews of people who felt they'd been wrong. There were 33,000. Mark bravely rejected all but 300. That's 32,700 rejections of the public's concern that maybe this is unfair in some way or overly harsh. But it's not Mark's fault. It's the ethos. So again, exemplary work, and we're very, very appreciative. I will say that in transportation in Studio City regarding the preferential parking districts, you've got several on David Rue's area today. It's very clear that the preferential parking districts are, I think Mitch O'Farrell put it best, a mixed bag. He called them a mixed bag when he was trying to sell one to some antagonistic neighbors. And they do. People push them. They're kind of lightly marketed through a network of insiders. In our neighborhood, Barry Johnson, who is I don't want to say illegitimate, he's a long-time transportation helper, but he does not have the same ethos of public meetings and outreach that you'd expect for a government agency. He has a whisper campaign worked on with the Jessica Fugati from David Rue's office. She moved over to Krikorian's, where they consult with various neighbors and then produce a result, but nobody knows about it, and they make it seem as if it's a done deal. So that is Gibson Transportation's work. They're doing an outstanding job under the leadership of the Gibson family, but there's a couple of them, and they donate prodigiously. Kara Tarosian was cashing CD7 campaign checks like crazy just before he decided to inflict a very harsh thing through the work of Barry Johnson and Jessica Fugati on the residents of Studio City. So we take note, and we encourage continued dialogue with the community about the transportation plans, not unilateral kind of reaching in, getting some contributions from Stacy Slifta and the people at Carpenter Avenue School who are, my kids went to Carpenter. I live right up the street. I love it. But they should not be playing politics with Paul Krikorian and Mike Fuhr while shutting out the actual voices of the neighborhood. So that's why we look closely at the work that they're doing, and why we'd like to get the follow-up on the records, because they've still not provided any of the data on which they base their calculations for our little Carpenter Avenue one-way gambit, which I urge Salita Reynolds and her team to do not put signs up shutting down traffic one way. It's a dumb idea. It's not appropriate, and it's based on, sort of they call him Randy Fraud, but his real name is Randy Freed. He's the new president of Studio City Neighborhood Council, and he's trying
Mr. President, thank you. Your time has expired.
And thank you. I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Okay, the next one, the last 4 digits of your phone number are 7006. Your line is open. Please identify yourself and which items you'd like to speak on. Line 7006.
All items in general public comment. Image them again.
Which items would you like to speak on, please?
All items full and general public comment.
Okay, your time has started. You have 3 minutes.
Yeah. So that's right. Calling from the nonprofit pending
You have 2 minutes for the items on the
transportation.
agenda and then a separate minute for general public comment. So let's start with your 2 minutes and please stick to items on the agenda.
Yes, there, faggot. Very good. Now, we got ourselves lots of juicy stealing going on in this agenda. Now, you take a look at, let's see here, for example, item number one, greasy filth. I say fuck that item, made by niggas. I don't like it. Bicycles don't belong on the street, man. Number two, Transportation Commissioner report and CD Fall. We don't care about that shit. Number three, this hairdresser, the criminal. By the way, he didn't get the LA Times endorsement. No on number three. And then CD5, Paul Pep. Correct, doing the horrible job for his people. He's a filthy nigga. No on number three and Fall. Also, number five is a fraud. It's published by Randy Fraud, a Studio City neighborhood cancer. No. LA Data number 8 doing his crazy shit. The state of good repair. Yeah, I was driving down to the valley. I couldn't get over all those humps over there on Woodley, over there in Burbank Boulevard. It got nothing but fucking potholes. Now, where you stealing the money? Fill up the potholes. Use dirt. Or like Mike Bonin, use crack. Using crack to fill the cracks is a better idea. It hardens a lot better. You can ask him about that. He know about that. And then we have the prohibition on parking. The juicy, beautiful Monica Rodriguez cleaning up her entire district. I drove down Sepulveda Boulevard, and she's got the secret. The secret
That's
is...
2 minutes for the items on the agenda. You now have 1 minute for general public comment, please.
Yeah, 1 minute for public comment. You motherfuckers. What you doing charging for parking on the meters? All the fucking meters are $6, $7 an hour. Let the people park for free during this pandemic. Turn off those meters, Mr. Chairman. But you know what? Mike Bonin ain't nothing but Trump with a skirt on. Cause he's just another crypto capitalist. And then over there we got another motherfucking Studio City. His name is Randy Fried Chicken, and he's helping Paul Krikorian steal Woodford Boulevard, not repave it. So then I say what I say, that Mike Bonin is a crack addict, he's a piece of shit motherfucker, and what he belongs is in a tent, not in CD11.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Okay, next caller. Last digit 4617.
I don't know that cat. I'm a lease driver.
Last four digits 4617. Your line is open. Please identify yourself and which item you'd like to speak on.
Okay, this is Gary Vogan from the Taxi Workers Association of Los Angeles. Let's see, what I want to speak to the Board Order 89. I forgot what item number that is on the agenda.
I don't believe that's on the agenda today, but you can certainly have 60 seconds for general public comment.
Okay, then it will be under general comments.
Yes, you may begin.
I can start now?
Yes, go ahead, Gary.
Yes, this is Gary Vogan from the Taxi Workers Association of Los Angeles. I'm its secretary, and we want to strenuously object to the sneak attack that was waged by Salida Reynolds and the Los Angeles Department of Transportation at last week's Taxi Cab Commission, in which Board Order 89 would basically result in the Uberization of the taxi cab industry without any proper hearings and public testimony. Board Order 89 is being shoved through the Taxi Cab Commission, and now the Transportation Committee. We regard this as the Uberization of the taxi cab industry. This at a time when the state Supreme Court has ruled that there's been a misclassification of drivers as independent contractors. When Uber has virtually destroyed our industry, and now the city council seeks to replicate the Uber and Lyft model for taxi cab drivers. We are outraged by this. We believe this is a violation of Municipal Code 71.12, violating the convenience and necessity findings. There's no 30-day notice. There's no hearings. This has just been shoved through. This should be renamed the Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell Transportation Act of 2020. It has absolutely no regard for the rules, regulations, and laws governing this industry.
Thank you. Your time has expired.
Thank
Gary,
you.
please reach out to our office about this. Thank you. Okay, next up, the last four digits, 7660. Your line is open. Please identify yourself and which item you'd like to speak on. Caller with the last four digits, 7660. Please identify yourself.
Governing this industry.
Thank you. Your time has expired.
Leon Slomovic.
Gary, please reach out to our office about this. Thank you. Please mute your other device so that way there's no feedback. And then would you also like general public comment? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, you have 60 seconds. Please begin.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. My name is Leon Slomovic. I'm president of the Taxi Workers Association of Los Angeles. LADOT has asserted that this committee and the city councils have approved the Taxi Commission, and the Taxi Commission has voted to change the existing franchise agreements and regulations under which the companies operating in the city of Los Angeles. This violates Section 71.12 and Section 71.25 in regards to convenience necessity finding and in changing the composition and the number of vehicles in franchises. It also allows companies to change and adjust rates based on vehicle types, such as wheelchair accessible vehicles, service area, and the time of day. This would put the companies and the drivers in jeopardy of violating AB 5 and the Sherman Act by exposing us to price coordination and control of the drivers. This has been done without assessment of how these changes will impact drivers. The city is essentially planning to use a regulatory framework based on TNC model, using these companies, while the city is suing these companies for exploitation and is recreating them in taxi cab regulations. We strenuously object to the conduct of Taxi Cab Commission.
Leon, your time has expired. Please reach out to our office. Thank you. Okay, that is it for public comment. Mr. Chair, turning it back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bruins. So, colleagues, with that, I would recommend we receive and file the Journal Manager's report, and was going to recommend we approve on consent items 3 through 8, 10, and 12. Any objections?
I would move the items.
Okay. Mr. Kretz, do you second?
Yes, I'll second.
All right. Do we need to do a roll call, Mr. Clerk?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Councilmember Bonin. Councilmember Buscaino.
Well, I can't hear the clerk, so let's do it just in case. Mr. Kretz.
Aye.
Mr. Buscaino.
Aye.
Mr. Bonin, aye. Okay, so that is the direction of the committee on items 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, and 12. So that brings us to item number 2.
Item number 2 is a categorical exemption, Board of Transportation Commissioners report and resolution relative to the consolidation and conversion of temporary preferential parking districts number 180, 184, 186, 188, 189, 190, 192, 195, and 239 in the Griffith Park area of Council District 4 near the Hollywood sign into a newly established preferential parking district number 320.
All right, and I understand CD4 wanted to ask for a change here. Is somebody from CD4 present? Mr. Orenstein, how are you?
Doing well, sir. How are you?
Good.
Good. Yeah, so this item is I'm sorry, I'll step back. Justin Orenstein, Policy Director for Councilmember David Rue. This item is pursuant to a letter that was sent by Councilmember Rue to DOT, as well as a DOT report recommending the consolidation of multiple temporary preferential parking districts in the Hollywood Hills, along with the addition of a handful of street segments that have been sandwiched by existing preferential parking districts. As everyone on the committee knows, the Hollywood Hills have long been a hotspot for tourism, traffic, parking, and related public safety issues. So the consolidation of existing parking districts, as we see it, would free up parking for residents with placards who won't be restricted to the geographies of their respective districts, and then the expansion to a handful of other street segments would help cure for the impacts on just those 5 street segments that have shouldered most of the burden of parking impacts in this particular area. So what our office would like to include for consideration is the inclusion of 5 street segments that would be Mulholland Highway between Woodview Drive and Deronda Drive, Linforth Drive between Deronda Drive and 6030 Linforth Drive, Ledgewood Drive between Rogerton Drive and Heather Drive, Ledgewood Drive between Rockcliffe Drive and Heather Drive, and Lugano Place between Heather Drive and the cul-de-sac north of Heather Drive. I'll defer to DOT here, but I assume that the committee would be required to amend recommendation 3 in the report, as well as add those to the resolution.
Great.
And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions? Okay, so I'd recommend we approve the item as amended as requested by CD4. Do I need to read that, or is there sufficient from the CD4 testimony?
That's sufficient, sir.
Great. All right. So without objection, right, that item is approved. Do we need to do a roll call?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Councilmember
Okay.
Bonin?
I'll let you do it this time.
Sure. Councilmember Bonin?
Aye.
Councilmember Busquino?
Aye.
Councilmember Koretz?
Aye.
This item is adopted as amended.
Thank you very much. You did that much better than I did. That brings us now to item number 9.
Item number 9 is an LADOT report and resolution relative to the designation of parking stalls and spaces on public streets for the exclusive use of electric vehicle charging stations at 212 new locations, and directing DOT to post signs and install any necessary pavement markings to give notice of no parking except for electric vehicle charging restrictions.
Great. Mr. Buscaino, I believe you had some questions on this item?
There we go. I just had to unmute myself. Thank you, Mr. Chair. On this item in particular, I'm happy to see the city advance its efforts in installing EV stations throughout the city. In particular, we've been able to push for this in the disadvantaged impacted communities in my district, so really appreciate the department's effort. Know we have come a long way. As you know, we prefer leading a little bit more urgency, but we're here. And really appreciate Ms. Reynolds and her team. I just wanted to know the projected challenges that the city faces when it comes to EV charging and enforcement in particular. Have we considered other options to make it clear that the designated spots are specifically for EV charging and EV charging only? If we considered painting the curb another color so folks can clearly identify it. I know we've seen a few charging stations in and around the southern portion of San Pedro. Just a couple questions I'd like to get the department to answer. And then as far as the future of EV charging, what does that look like in our city, and how are we working to continue to expand the number of EV charging locations throughout the city?
Hello, this is Brian Gallagher, Department of Transportation, Principal Transportation Engineer. For the electric vehicle charging station, currently the process is that the Bureau of Street Lighting, or DWP, will install the chargers. The DOT keeps a ongoing spreadsheet of all the locations to keep track of them, and that we work with BSL and DWP to populate the spreadsheet. And then every once in a while, we will gather all the locations up and put them into a single resolution. And only after the resolution is adopted by council can the district of DOT put the signs up that say electric vehicle charging only, or no parking, electric vehicles only. And then after the signs are up, we will let parking enforcement know that they can enforce the signs. And it may seem like it's putting the cart before the horse, but if we were to reverse the process and have DOT vet all the sites first before the chargers were installed, we probably wouldn't have that many chargers installed right now, and it would definitely slow down the process moving forward.
Really good to know. And then remind me, Brian, if you can, how accessible, I mean, is very user-friendly. I believe there's an app where it identifies these sites. Is that correct?
Yes. I believe the name of the app is PlugShare.
Got it.
And we're trying to get all of these charging stations also added as a layer on the Navigate LA. So at least you can see the ones in Los Angeles City.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great.
I don't know, council member, if you want us to add, I can add a little color on future plans for charging infrastructure in the city as well. So, as much as possible, the Department of Transportation has been aggressively pursuing grants that will allow us to expand public charging infrastructure, specifically as it relates to EV car sharing. And you may know that we've started the EV car sharing program through a partnership with a public-private partnership where we put in about 200 charging stations throughout the city, and we're working to make those publicly available, and then pursuing additional grants to expand that program and expand the number of publicly available chargers. I believe you also had a question about other ways of demarking the actual charging locations, and we can certainly investigate that a little further and see if there are other things that we can do to make those more visible, so that they're digitally visible on an app or in Navigate LA, but also very physically visible and quickly identifiable by folks who for charging infrastructure. And then we want to continue to partner with Bureau of Street Lighting and Department of Water and Power in the aggressive expansion of those publicly available chargers. We are also pursuing the installation of those chargers in our private parking lots, well, not private parking lots, city parking lots that we have around the city to make sure that there are charging facilities available there as well. But we know that there's a long way to go here, a lot of work to do. The Transformative Climate Communities grant that we got and are working with the community to roll out. We have another one in the Valley. But there's really, we could never be doing too much in this arena, because there's such a great need to make sure that the public feels confident that there are going to be places to charge, and especially for all of the delivery apps that are now, pledging to turn their fleets over to either hybrid electric or full electric. We want to make sure that that is an option that's available for people who are driving for a living. So that they can easily recharge their electric vehicles.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Kretz?
Well, thank you, and thank you, Salita. This is an exciting step forward. I've been pushing for us to do this for so many years, and I think we're finally reaching the technology and the commitment and all the things that are aligned. And glad that we're also doing this with an eye towards environmental justice and doing it in the areas that have faced a lot of pollution and a lot of environmental harm in the past. One of the things I wanted to ask is, how many spaces potentially do we have in city lots that have not been set up so far? So if we maximized the likely spaces that we would set aside, what are we talking about?
So I'm not sure if Ken, do you have a sense of that?
So it's really difficult to tell. We have about, I want to say 11,000 spaces in our off-street parking facilities. We're currently installing 44,000 DC fast chargers this fiscal year. We're trying to spread them out. We're also talking with Tesla about installing Tesla superchargers in different facilities. Now, when we don't have a number as far as how many we should install at the different facilities, but we know that we probably have hundreds of spaces that are still available for future EV charging. And so as we get different partners, as grant funds come along, we install those in the different facilities. So we're going to continue that process going forward. And something else I want to mention is we're also working on a program for public charging or for EV charging in public right-of-way. That's allowing private companies to come in and also install DC fast chargers in public right-of-way. So we're currently working on those guidelines right now.
Ken, could you say those numbers again that you said right at the top?
Yeah, I think we have about 11,000 street facilities spaces.
And then how many chargers?
We're installing 44 DC fast chargers right now. And
44. Got it.
We already have over 100.
4,000.
No.
Amazing. We're doing
It's incredible.
as many chargers as we have parking spaces.
No. We have 44 DC fast chargers, and we currently have 100 existing level 2 and DC fast chargers in our parking facilities. So we're looking.
There was a while there, Councilmember, where we actually had a benchmark that we were working towards, and I just can't. I don't have it at the top of mind, but we can certainly share that information with your office.
And are we looking at any kind of requirements further than what we have now to require places where people tend to park, especially supermarkets, to have some spaces available?
You mean on their private lots?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that would probably be something that would be in the planning department's purview. I don't know, Ken, if you know the answer to that or not. I believe they started including that recently.
I think that's a Tommy Carranza question that he could be able to speak to, because you're right, it's a planning requirement if it does exist or they're thinking about it.
Let's see if we can get the answer for you maybe over the course of the meeting and circle back.
And one other question, almost all chargers that one runs across that one has to pay for require you to be a member of one thing or another. So for whatever reason, they don't make it easy to just pull out a credit card and pay. Do we have any process where the ones we're putting in can just be paid for by credit card and aren't so complicated?
So in our off-street facilities, we have level 2 chargers, which do not require any payment. Those are free. But when it comes to DC fast chargers, we typically are working with other companies where they get the grant and install, and all that's being charged is for electricity. They do frequently require some type of membership, but we can inquire about future opportunities to where it's a little bit more seamless and frictionless.
Yeah, because I know most of those, Beverly Hills, for instance, has them in their lots, but I'm not a member, and so it's frustrating as an EV user that you have to be a member of all the different entities that rent them out.
Yeah, it comes with
They
the
want your
territory.
data, council member. Your data is more valuable than your money.
That's probably true, but I think we should get to the point where someone just uses a credit card, and we've made it so easy that it winds up being used more.
Agreed.
But this is great, so thank you for moving this forward and letting us know of this great progress.
Okay, no further questions then. I'll echo the enthusiasm of my colleagues, and I'll also echo Mr. Koretz's frustration with having to have multiple memberships to different chargers. But look forward to this moving forward. So, do we have a motion to approve?
Move it.
We have a second.
Second.
All right, let's do a roll call.
Councilmember Bonin. Councilmember Bonin. Councilmember Buscaino.
Aye.
Councilmember Koretz.
A very enthusiastic guy.
This item is approved.
Okay, that brings us to item number 11.
Item number 11 is an LADOT report relative to the transition plan to resume parking enforcement for previously suspended parking infractions and proposed economic relief measures for parking fines.
Okay. So I'm going to see this item up, if that's okay, and then I will hand it over to the chief for any additional comments. So as you all know, at the beginning of the pandemic, LADOT did everything we could to try.
We're getting a lot of feedback. If everybody else could maybe go on mute to make sure that we're not getting the feedback on Ms. Reynolds. Thank you.
Great. So as you all know, at the beginning of the pandemic, LADOT did everything that we could to examine sort of business line by business line. Where were we putting a financial burden on people, or where were we charging for something where we could either release or remove that during the Safer at Home orders for a whole number of reasons, both economic and financial, as well as just practical. And so we did, under the mayor and council's orders, relax several categories of parking enforcement, as well as several activities that we normally undertake, including towing and some of the activities that we undertake with regards to citations. So we froze all of the parking ticket fine amounts in time so that they wouldn't continue to increase and accrue during the Safer at Home orders. And we did everything we could within state law to try and make it easy for people to comply with Safer at Home, and also to sort of lessen any burdens that our activities might put on them. Over the course of the last 6 months, we have continued to relax that enforcement, notably in the arena of residential street sweeping. And as you all know, Angelenos, some of us have not just one car, but 2, 3, 4 cars. And so they typically get parked on city streets. And what's happened over time is 2 things have really changed. One is that we are beginning to get complaints from residents and hear concerns about accumulation of garbage, debris, rodents, etc., on the streets because there has been no street sweeping for the past several months. The second thing that's happened is, as we watch the data of how people are moving and the mobility trends during this pandemic, what we saw is that at the beginning of the pandemic, in March and April and May, there was traffic fell by as much as 60% in some places. And so we could see that people were complying with Safer at Home. However, over the last 2 or 3 months, those traffic levels have crept back up, so that now we're closer to about 10 to 20% below normal traffic levels. Traffic is distributed a little bit differently. It's not so concentrated during the AM and PM commutes. It's spread out a little more evenly over the course of the day. And so as we look at this, we see that it's probably time for us to readjust our enforcement activities. And so we were asked by council to bring forward a recommendation about how we might resume some of those parking enforcement activities. So with the concurrence of the mayor's office, we're presenting these alternatives or these recommendations to you both to acknowledge the fact that people are moving around, they're moving their cars around, they're driving more. There's not the same sort of adherence to the safer at home where people really are not mobile. And so we think there's an opportunity to get back out, make sure the streets are being swept, address some of those resident concerns, and also resume many of the other parking enforcement activities that we had undertaken. Now, our challenge is still that financial piece. We know Angelinos are hurting. We know there's still things that we could do as a department to try and make it easier for folks. And so we've proposed a number of amnesty programs, both to give people relief if they have parking tickets that they've had in the past. They can come back in and pay those at the original levels instead of paying all of the fees that have been accrued on top of that. And also proposed other programs to accompany our CAP program that allow people to pay a reduced fine amount if they pay within a certain amount of time, and some other ideas we have to sort of lessen that burden. So with that, I'm happy to turn it over to the chief to say anything additional about sort of the operation itself.
Thank you, Salida. So just to get more specific on the timeline that Salida mentioned, providing the groundwork of how we came to these conclusions. Street cleaning and abandoned enforcement, basically these two go hand in hand. And for instance, residential streets, if we tell someone that they're relaxed in street cleaning, potentially they could be in violation of abandoned 72 hours later. So it's our belief that, these both go hand in hand, and based on the public safety hazard, the amount of complaints that we do receive, we're recommending to resume enforcement on October 1, as previously recommended. Peak hour and anti-gridlock enforcement, as the businesses have begun to reopen it and folks are going back to work and traffic volume is increasing, we recommend that we do resume enforcement October 1 as well. Expired registration, DMV reopened back in June, and basically we believe this should be resumed October 1. And just to give you a little insight on our protocols, someone that may be expired in March, we usually give them 30 days. And so someone that is expired in March would not be cited or eligible for a citation until after May 1. Overnight and oversized. So at the beginning of the pandemic, while the traffic volumes were low, the city ceased oversized and overnight parking districts. And so the restrictions and the enforcement to further assist reopening for those that were experiencing homelessness. As traffic patterns and volumes are returning to normal and oversized vehicles create an increased safety concern, we recommend that we resume enforcement and impounding October 1st as well. And we will continue to work with our partners from LAHSA, LAPD, to make sure that we address anybody that's living in their vehicle so that they are afforded the services that they so deserve. Expired preferential parking permits. So we basically closed our our service centers to maintain the health and safety of the public as well as our employees. We recommend that we go back to enforcement on October 1, but we're going to provide a 2-week window to make sure that the folks have time to go into these public service centers and get their permits that may have been delayed through the mail. And then lastly, scofflaws. Because of the amnesty programs that we recommend that we don't return back to enforcement until January 1, 2021. And that gives folks time to become compliant and also not to be subject to booting. We're working with our vendor on the boot program to make sure that we have a contract. That could take about 90 days. So together with the amnesty program and that, we recommend January 1, 2021. And with that, I think probably Ken might want to add some insight onto the programs that we have.
Thank you, Chief. So when it comes to economic relief programs in the city of LA, we are by far one of the most progressive in the state when it comes to helping people with citation debt. parking citation debt. As Salita mentioned, we have existing programs such as the Community Assistance Parking Program, which allows the homeless to convert their parking citation debt into community service. We also have low-income payment programs, which LADOT work with the state to help make state law and continue to work with the state legislature to improve the programs. We also provide accessible adjudication hearings. So not only do we take hearings by mail and telephone, we also do limited basis video conferencing, which we're hoping to make a state permanent through state law. So we have a legislative proposal that we're working on there. And then as Salita mentioned, we temporarily suspended, or I should say the mayor temporarily suspended parking fines and payment deadlines for parking citations until October 1st. Now the new programs that we've been working on at the direction of the mayor are citation amnesty programs and an early payment program. So the citation amnesty program specifically is for citations over 3 years old. We're going to give people the one-time opportunity to enroll in the program and reduce the payments or the base fine, reduce the citations down to the base fines by eliminating all late fees and allowing them time to pay those off. So that way they can have the DMV holds lifted, tax intercepts, and so forth. Also, we're doing an unemployment program that is specifically geared towards helping those that lost their job during the local emergency. So what will happen if you lost your job during that time, provide proof that you're receiving an unemployment check, and then we'll reduce it down to the base citation, waive the fees, and allow time to pay off those fees. And then finally, there's an early payment program for the citations that were suspended during the local emergency. If you pay those citations within the first 48 hours, you'll get a $20 discount on those citations. So cumulative, we're doing a lot of things, a lot of exciting things to help people during this time. And with that, I will hand it back to Salita.
I think that concludes our presentation. We're happy to take your questions.
Okay, I've got some, but I'm happy to go to my colleagues first. Mr. Koretz, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I was just wondering, it sounds like we have some great programs for people that are more in need. How are we going to let people know? Because obviously things like getting a discount on the first day only work if large numbers of people are aware that they can save that money and have the ability to jump at the chance.
Yeah, I believe some of the plans include obviously putting it on our website to make people aware. We're going to have our staff in the public service centers as well as LADOT staff let people know that these services are available to them. And then I'm guessing that there's probably going to be some kind of press announcement, whether it's through LADOT or otherwise.
Yeah, and we can consider whether or not to put it on the citation itself. And obviously in any and all of our payment systems where people come to interact with us, either online or by the phone, to come pay their tickets, we can share information in those places as well. But maybe it's for the early bird program, it might make sense to actually have it printed on the ticket itself. So we can pursue those kinds of options. Sort of traditional public outreach campaign. Hopefully, you know, there's pretty much anything we do with respect to parking fines and parking tickets in this town gets its own blast of giant free media, good, bad, or indifferent. And we're hoping this will be no different. But we'll do everything we can do in our power to get the word out. And you know, if we don't see an uptick in people taking advantage of the program, we'll need to retrench, go back to the drawing board and see if we need to do something a little broader to make sure people know about it.
And maybe you can do some sort of a nice graphic that describes all the programs that certainly at least each council member can put in their newsletter. And
that's a great suggestion.
Other ways we can use to sort of get the word out. But I'm glad to see this happen, and we can get back to having clean streets and improve our sanitation, and start removing more abandoned vehicles and all the various problems that we've been hearing about from our constituents. So I'm glad that we're at a point where we're ready to go back to enforcement.
Thank you, Mr. Koretz. Mr. Buscaino?
No, I want to echo Mr. Koretz's comments and really thank the department for moving on a comprehensive and fair resolution to addressing some of the parking issues facing our city in a time of COVID-19. I believe this is a fair approach. It gives folks an opportunity to pay back in a way, and if they're really struggling, delay payment, coupled with the fact that being responsive to our residents who have been very frustrated with some of the quality of life issues in dealing with the abandoned vehicles, trash buildup in those streets that have not been swept in months. So I think it's a fair compromise moving forward, and I want to acknowledge the department for these recommendations, and looking forward to sending this to full council. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Buscaino and Mr. Koretz. Not to be contrarian, but I have a somewhat different perspective on some elements of this, and want to ask a couple questions. This was the city did, and the mayor announced, and the council did a number of things at the start of the pandemic because we were concerned about the unprecedented economic vulnerability of some of our residents. Many of our residents, most maybe, and we did not want to be putting an extra burden on them at a time when their resources were either diminishing or completely disappearing. And we also wanted to make sure we weren't encouraging people to unnecessarily leave their homes when they didn't need to. So let me ask a couple questions about the first part of that, about the sort of economics of it. While things are starting to get better, and some people are going back to work and people are going out more, I'm still seeing at every food giveaway I am at, or at every mutual aid that I am at, that people are still hurting really, really bad in the city. So I feel like a lot of the circumstances that led us to start this are still in place. Now, there are other things that have become issues that may be a countervailing force on that. I think the issue of the trash and the rodents and the buildup is a legit one. So, for residential street sweeping, not a problem for me. I think that makes sense. And I think some of these make sense, but there's a couple that just sort of bother me. The impounding of the oversized vehicles, where I think it's a pretty fair presumption that people are living in most of them, really bothers me. This council has been very strong in saying what it would like to see nationwide or statewide in terms of rent forgiveness and eviction moratoriums, and the idea of impounding somebody's home just doesn't. I can't stomach that one, and that's a real problem. I think if you're in the OVOs, you should be obeying the other rules of parking, and I'm even okay with subject to some of the ticketing, but the impounding of it really bothers me. Impounding the abandoned vehicles, God bless. I mean, we could have been doing that earlier, frankly. Abandoned vehicles is one thing. A vehicle that somebody's living in is an entirely different idea. On the fines and the late fees, I don't know that. I don't want us to be in the position of putting another hit on families that are already hurting. I know there's a time at which we need to put this back, and I know the pressure is intense because of our cratering revenues. But I'm still not quite comfortable with this one yet. But I had a question, Ken, about the unemployment aspect. How does somebody prove they're unemployed again under our system?
So what we're looking to do is anybody that can prove that they received an unemployment check or they've been approved by the state for unemployment will qualify for this program. And really we're using that because the state has the most comprehensive system in place and most universal system that we can actually take and verify.
Yeah, I get that. And that's probably the best the city can do. It's just, the state system for unemployment has been an abysmal failure. I mean, it's been, front page of the paper, it's legislative inquiries, it's just been a disaster. And it cuts out a lot of people. I mean, it cuts out people who are working under the table. It cuts out, street vendors and all sorts of people. And whether you approve of people working under the table or not, that's a family of Angelinos that are in desperation and are hurting that wouldn't be availed by our solution. So I got a problem with that one too. Two more questions. One on the PPDs, the expired permits. People have to go into the office to renew those, or is there a way to do that online?
No, they could do them online, and they could also, do it by mail. We're just getting a little bit of a buffer. So in case that had just submitted it right before the public service centers opened, they submitted it by mail, we're just giving that buffer.
Okay, so we're giving them the option of going into an office, but we're not requiring them to go into an office.
No,
Okay.
We're just providing the additional option.
Okay, so on that part, I'm okay with. Last question, and I don't know if there's anybody here who can answer it, is I'm cognizant of the dynamic on a lot of issues between the council and the mayor's office in this, where I think one of the things that's been confusing for people on the parking stuff is we've made an announcement and it was very specific for certain things, and some people assumed it was relaxed parking for everything, and then they hear the announcement that we will resume on this date, and then the council comes in and says, no, we're going to extend it again. I don't want to confuse people by us doing something and then having the mayor's office turn around and do something different. Have we heard anybody from the mayor's office? Is anybody from the mayor's office here to say where the mayor's office is on this? I'd hate it for us.
Councilmember, just to underline in my opening remarks that all of our recommendations are presented with concurrence from the mayor's office.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so well, it sounds like both of my colleagues are very comfortable with this. I still have reservations, so I'll.
If I could, Councilmember, just flag one piece, which I know won't be does not completely address all of your concerns, but just on the oversized vehicles, that operation has been just be honest, extremely challenging for the department, because there are very few companies that actually provide that service, have the equipment that can actually move an oversized vehicle, or the storage for where those vehicles will end up. And I know you're intimately familiar with all of those issues, and also, secondary markets for those vehicles that developed, when we were really struggling. So I appreciate you flagging that issue. But the upside, I guess, is that it typically was taking very long periods of time to get those vehicles removed. And so, we can consider ways to continue to alert those, the owners of those vehicles in the interim between when we've determined they need to be impounded and the impound itself of that upcoming action, because the law is actually quite permissive. And if you have moved your vehicle by, any small, that 72-hour law is very permissive. If you've moved your vehicle by even a very short amount, then the clock restarts. So we do try and focus our very limited resources on vehicles that are truly public health hazards, and that are, burned out or damaged in other ways. We try and prioritize those. Because we're very sensitive to the same issues that you raised, and want to continue to work with this council on a better approach to that entire operation, because of the challenges and the amount of time it takes, but also the frustrations that we hear in our call center every day from people on all sides of that issue. So I appreciate that you raised it. I don't have a great solution for it. But want to keep on working to see if we can come up with a better way to do that in a way that is respectful, and also deals with the real public health issues that develop from truly abandoned vehicles that's really where we want to prioritize and focus our response.
Yeah, thanks. I make a distinction between the abandoned and the ones folks are living in. Mr. Kretz, you had another question or comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say I'm not sure our approach to this particular issue is necessarily ready for prime time. So perhaps, Mr. Chair, since you're also concerned about it, we could excise that from these recommendations and take that up at a later date once we have the rest of these changes more established.
The towing of OVOs, the impounding?
Yeah. I think I don't know that we're ready to start that up, and that there aren't too many loose ends and unresolved issues to do that. So I think you make a reasonable point, and I would be happy to move to excise that one item from the list.
Okay, I'll second that then. Mr. Bruscaino?
Yeah, I kind of struggle with that, Mr. Kretz. And a case in point is that a number of businesses, specifically in the Gateway area, have been really struggling with the amount of trash that's kind of been thrown upon outside of these RVs. And even with the compassionate way of dealing with LASA and our service providers on the ground, we really are not making any improvements. So it's been very frustrating. So I can't support that bifurcating or easing up on the impounding of RVs, because that's one of the main complaints that we're getting from residents and businesses in the impacted communities.
Mr. Kretz?
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you in terms of the complaints and the impact. I'm just not sure in the COVID era and with all the other problems in implementation that we shouldn't give the department more time to figure out the appropriate approach to these. We're not going to be able to implement all of this instantly anyway. So as much as I receive complaints as you do, as I'm sure we all do about RVs in places where they shouldn't be, I just think it would be fine as the next batch of things we deal with in this arena. I'm not sure that, especially with COVID numbers still fairly high, that we want to be moving people around, taking their RVs and leaving them on the street without them. I can see a lot of problematic elements, as much as they are a problem in our community as well. So,
yeah. So based on my what we're seeing on the ground and my lived experience and being able to work with my field deputies, clearly in these encampment areas, no one's practicing social distancing. You're seeing a group of folks who it's unfortunately they're not accepting the help in and around even the bridge homes, and they congregate. And I'm not saying we're not losing hope on these souls, but at the same time, they are not respecting the CDC guidelines and social distancing requirements. But aside from that, a question I have for Ms. Reynolds, in the red zones, are we impounding RVs in red zones today?
I don't know if Devin is there, if she has any. I see Brian shaking his head. Devin, do you have an answer?
If it's a red zone and it's creating a traffic hazard, then yes, we do have the ability under that vehicle code to impound. But of course, there are some issues with the fact that there's nowhere to store them, as you mentioned earlier, and it's solely upon the OPGs or the police garages that have storage space. So it has to be done. It's not as swift as we would just a normal vehicle in a traffic hazard, but it does elevate it and it does give it some priority when it is hazard.
This is Brian Gallagher. On towing in the red zones, the law is very specific about when you can tow from a red zone and when you can't. So just because you see a vehicle in a red zone, it doesn't mean that you can tow it 100% of the times. And like Devin mentioned, even if we try to tow it, it takes a while for us to make a reservation with the tow yard to get them to come out 2 weeks later to tow the vehicle.
And this is why we're seeing the demise of our quality of life, Brian. The frustrations abound where, you know, even in these the red zone areas, in cul-de-sacs, in the northern end of my district, in the Gateway, you're seeing just mounds and buckets of feces and urine, septic tanks being spilled onto the sidewalk, hundreds of bikes in and around the RV, and businesses are trying to move forward on a daily basis. This is business complaints that I've seen, that I personally observed myself, and I'm not even talking about the neighborhood areas as well, where even on 9th Street in San Pedro, we have an RV who's actually, the individual is trespassed in somebody's backyard and plugged in using the residents' power. So, and the RV's in a red zone. So again, if we're gonna, you know, march towards the improvement of our quality of life and address individuals who are completely not abiding by the rules, then we're going to see a continued demise of our quality of life in our city. This is why I can't support this.
So I just say, I hear what you're saying, Mr. Buscaino. I hear a lot of the same. And just to be clear, what I'm talking about is not towing an oversized vehicle for being an oversized vehicle. If something is blocking an intersection, if something, you know, is in a red zone or is otherwise violative, what I'm talking about is the impounding of an oversized vehicle simply for being an oversized vehicle, which would happen in the OVO zones. And while I certainly agree that all those quality of life problems are an issue, I just don't see how they get any better by effectively evicting someone from their RV and putting them on the street. I mean, they still need to defecate, and they're going to do it somewhere as well. If it's not a septic tank, it's going to be on the street corner. So that's, I just don't want in this to be taking someone who's hanging on to the very bottom of the rung and take the ladder away.
Yeah, I agree, Mike. And this is why, you know, as we march toward this LA Alliance case, that we can identify locations where folks can safely park, have access to bathrooms and showers and resources on site, right? And that is our way forward. But in the interim, we still have to balance the concerns of our business and neighborhoods.
Okay. So any further discussion or questions? All right. So the first vote then would be on Mr. And I still have the issue with the fines and the unemployment stuff, but the first vote then would be on Mr. Koretz's motion, which, if I understand it correctly, Mr. Koretz would remove from the sort of restoration of enforcement the impounding of oversized vehicles for violating the OVO. Yes, and I'd also like to ask the department to come back in a month or two with a plan, a next step plan for what we do with those, but I just don't think we have the answers right now. Okay, so Mr. Clerk, let's vote on that amendment.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Councilmember Bonin?
Yes.
Councilmember Buscaino?
No.
Councilmember Koretz?
Aye.
2 ayes. This motion is approved.
Okay, now let's vote on the item as amended.
Councilmember Bonin?
No.
Councilmember Buscaino?
Yes.
Councilmember Koretz?
Yes.
This item is approved with 2 ayes as amended.
Oh, Okay, Mr. Clerk, is there anything on the desk, or have we completed the agenda?
The desk is clear, sir.
Okay. With that, let me thank everybody from the department. Let me thank my colleagues. Let me thank everybody else from the city departments who've been here, and those who called in for public comment. We are adjourned.